Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call us to order and declare that we have a quorum of 7 members present, 6 that are here in person, and our 7th is present via teleconference.
Just had her photo taken.
And yes, thank you for pointing that out. So that takes us to item C. 1, consideration, discussion, possible action related to the 2019-20 budget development. Dr. Ely.
Mr. Harris, members of the board, we are still very early in the budget development process. So we have here in April is building a little bit on the information that we saw last month from Mr. Martindale regarding our current law that is in effect right now and what that means potentially for us for next year. Mike will talk a little bit about House Bill 3 and what that could mean, or what's currently proposed in the bill. Still a long way to go at the legislature as well. And then we're going to talk a little bit about a concept on how the funding mechanism works regarding present year values and current year values and previous year values, and that's how we'll end up. So with the presentation is Mike Martindale, Deputy Superintendent and CFO. Mr. Martindale.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ely. I think we'll start with just kind of looking to see how we're tracking current year, 18-19. Here's just a snippet from the numbers as of the end of the 5th 6 weeks. So at the beginning, and we'll just go arrow by arrow, at the end of the 5th 6 weeks, our average daily attendance was running at a loss of 0.18% relative to the end of year last year. If you remember, we adopted a budget of a loss of 1%. So we are tracking on the positive side of that projection at this point in time. At the end of the 4th 6 weeks, it was actually a negative 0.14%. So it really didn't move from the end of the 4th to the 5th 6 weeks, and typically it moves more. But what we're seeing right now is actually our enrollment as of today versus April 16th of last year, we're up 31 students. So we're really managing this year well relative to where we thought we might be at this point in time as far as enrollment. The next number is 104.6 million. That is what we adopted as far as our property tax revenue in this year's budget. I do anticipating making an amendment to that value here in the next month or two. I actually had contemplated making a few adjustments in this month's financials, but I decided to wait another month or two. But I do anticipate adjusting or amending that value up around $300,000. We're tracking well on our collection rate for this year, so I could very well see our property tax revenue landing closer to $105 million. On the interest income right below that, I don't have an arrow next to it, but I do expect to amend that up another $100,000 as well here in the next few months to $1.3 million. It's those escalating interest rates, Dr. Wesson. I like that. Absolutely. SHARS, we adopted a $1.7 million on that. We made an adjustment with our financials a month or so ago up to $1.9 million. TEA is adjusting the timeline as far as when they're providing the reimbursements on this value. So we're going to actually recognize another settle up to that $1.9 million in this year's current books. I anticipate we'll receive that by mid-June, and that will be at minimum an additional $1 million on that number. So I would expect to adjust our revenues over the next several months let's say an extra $1 million on SHARS, an extra $300,000 on property tax, and an extra $100 on interest income. So about a plus of 1.4 on this number in the next several months. So I'll touch on those too and mention those as far as when they'll show up in your amendments and financials the next couple of months. On our appropriations side, the only one I'm really showing you here is the Chapter 41 recapture payment. We had projected a 14.6 million, so we're tracking much better there relative to our earlier projections. That's why you see the difference down in the bottom. We adopted a $4.6 million deficit, but we're running at about a 3.8. And that difference right now, because I haven't made those adjustments in revenue or any adjustments on the appropriation side, is just the difference in the recapture payment at this point in time. I will tell you also, payroll costs were tracking very well in that, so there will also be some considerations to adjusting our appropriations side a little bit. I feel comfortable in saying that next few months I could see that 3.8 moving closer to the 2.4 mark over the next couple of months. So we're moving in the right direction right now as far as current year. Now, I can't say that for next year right now, but anyway, I thought I'd lead with the positive. For 1920, all of you are familiar with these timelines. We share these in March as well. Of course, I'm going to, here in just a few minutes, put some of those numbers in place I mentioned to you in March in our first little budget run. When you see what next year looks like, as well as we'll apply that out for 4 or 5 years as well, just so you can kind of see what the future holds under current state finance system. Exceptional item and new personnel request, that's April the 26th. So a week from this Friday, Cabinet will begin, or we'll spend a day meeting with principals and directors or anyone who submitted a new personnel request for next year or an exceptional item request. And what that will allow us to do is to ask questions and then provide explanation as to their request and give us as much information as possible so that we can try to prioritize some of those things. And I'll show you how much we have in request here in just a moment. We received preliminary values from the appraisal district at the end of this month. And of course, each month here through May, June, and July, provide updates as things progress. We'll receive our certified values end of July. And of course, every August we come with proposed budget and the tax rate to support that budget. Last time we met on the 19th, I had $2.3 million of requests in new personnel. The deadline for submission for request was March the 22nd. So I received quite a bit of personnel requests those last few days prior to the deadline. So that number went from 2.3 million to 4.2 million. Exceptional item requests didn't go up that much from 1.5 when we met in March. Those next few days when the deadline to submit was March 22nd, it went up to 2.2 million. And again, these are the items that Cabinet will review with those folks making those requests next Friday. Again, just to allow us some gauge to prioritize. Because we simply, you can't recognize at 6.4 million, regardless of our current situation, or even if it was a positive year, still, it'd be very difficult to pick up that amount of requests any particular year. So 1920, and again, this is under current system that we're working with right now. And wants to kind of show you those projections in the out years. Then I'll touch on House Bill 3 just a little bit and some of the high points of that. And I can tell you now that the particular things that I touch are all positives for our district. So it just really depends on how things go the next few months in Austin as to where exactly our circumstance truly will be. So the projections I'm going to show you are the current system now. On the revenue side, I'll use 2.9% on our average daily attendance, and that is straight from Templeton, our demographers and their anticipated growth for next year. So I'll use an increase of 2.9%. Our historical average over the last 8 years has been 3.34%. Local values, the revenue, I'm using an increase of 6.5%, and we've run at 7.13 over the last 7 years. In that last column, you can kind of see our historical the last 4 years from 7.73 in 15-16 all the way up to 10 and 11. And last year we settled in just a little shy of 7%. So those are the assumptions I'll use on the revenue side. On the appropriations side, I have $1.4 million set aside for raises to employees. Have not set aside any funds to make any adjustments to our the district's contributions to health insurance. Nothing along the lines of increasing budgets, 0%. David threw me, so I kept going to see if I can just keep going after he tries to throw me off here. 0% on supplies and materials. I do have $500,000 earmarked for additional positions and exceptional items, and let me touch on that because you just saw that was millions of dollars. What we'll really try to do is take a look at the exceptional items because those are one-time expenditures, and we'll prioritize those and try to capture as many of those under current year budget as possible since we're realizing some capacity in this year's budget. So while I have exceptional items on there, that is probably more positions, so to speak, because it's a reoccurring cost. Riverbend is still tracking right at the $850,000 mark of new personnel as we've kind of reallocated among our existing elementary schools, and recapture is right at 18. I think actually what I'm going to show in a few minutes is more along the 17.8 mark. So something else I want to mention, and this group knows this, but I think we have to recognize this because a lot of folks have done a lot of great work to really kind of hold the line on these items. But the last 2 years, we have picked up a new line item in recapture, which has grown 200% over the last, just from last year to this year, and the cost from the 4.95 to 14 now. And then we've opened 2 new campuses, both of which combined has cost us $3.8 million in new personnel, in addition to adding other personnel, an extra $1 million each of those years for just high needs areas. So if you think about what we've been able to do with our budget, and then coming in at audit last year with being able to put a few more dollars back in fund balance, a lot of hard work has gone into managing this and getting in the buildings open, trying to address some area of needs, taking on recapture, and just being very diligent with taxpayers' money. So I think we just have to understand what we've been able to do with the district throughout these last couple of years. Even though it may not look like the rosiest picture at times, I think there are absolute positives. For 1920, just in the revenue side, as I mentioned to you, I'm using 2.93% growth on enrollment, 6.5% on our on our values. So that gives us a revenue projection of $128.4 million. On the appropriations side, that is an increase of $1.4 million, which equates to about a 1.5% raise off midpoint across the board. The RB is Riverbend Elementary. That's the $850,000 that I spoke of earlier. The new and the exceptional item request, that's the $500,000 of new personnel requests that I mentioned that we were using earlier on our appropriations side. The $9.1 million, even though it shows a 0% increase from the prior year, if you see $8.9 million under the contracted services for current year, and then it goes to 9.1, that is an additional $200,000 to pay the utilities at Riverbend. That's a cost that we have to build in, but I'm not increasing existing contracted services numbers or budgets. That's just an add simply because we're opening a new building, and we need to set aside some pennies to turn on the lights and the air conditioning and those types of things. And our Chapter 41 recapture payment right now is coming in at 17.8, which has us looking at a $6.6 million deficit. I think last month I said 6.7. A little bit of adjustment on the recapture payment because of fifth 6 weeks ADA and some weights associated with how those things calculate. When I run that in the out years, things start to play out for us a little bit better. We get through circumstances for next year, and what has created that for us is this drop in enrollment current year. So things begin to kind of level out a little bit for us. I'm just going to work my way across the top. You can see for ADA, I've used 3%, 2.5%, and 2.75%. Those are straight from the demographer. Property tax increase, I've used 6% across the board. And you can see the indicators on the appropriation side as we run out. But using all those factors, if we looked at 2021, that's a $2.5 million deficit, and you can follow your way across to the 3.6 and the 1.1. There would be another legislative year thereafter 2020-21 as well. So there's always the possibilities of those different things changing as we project out.
What is causing on like the state available school fund?
Going up and down?
Up and down.
Every other, the available school fund is a per capita that is provided per student, and it's really a return on the investment of the foundation school fund monies. And so they project a return on that money, and so they're very conservative the first year of the biennium, and then they kind of settle up the second year. So you see that per capita amount fluctuate from, $200 per student the first year of the biennium up to like $365 or so the second year. So that's why what Mr. Wesson is speaking of available school fund, Mr. Schaefer, is the available school, how it goes up and down by a couple million each year. But that's just the payout rate. They pay out a higher per capita. The state does the second year of the biennium. So that's why you see this fluctuation of a couple million each year. If you notice the foundation, it's staying pretty steady at that point. I will tell you, we were last August, these were looking a little bit better in our projections, but what changed since then is we've got updated information from our demographer. A lot of these projected growth numbers were, in the previous projections, were 4 and 3%. So some of our growth is projected to slow down, which has contributed to our recapture payment too. So lots of things in play behind the scenes on these calculations. Take this information and we place this in our graph. You're familiar with this particular graph. I'll review it real quickly with you. The yellow or the gold, it represents the 17.5% of the projected appropriations for that particular year. It's kind of a cash flow threshold mark. The red are the projections on the fund balance that I was showing at August of last year. So this would be the fund balance amount relative to our 17.5% cash flow number. So you can see where it was crossing over at 2020-21 in this particular area.
Can you talk a little bit about what it means for us to go below that line?
Sure. I mean, we would still have, if you look at the farthest out year, which is the 2022, 2023 year, we would still have $26.8 million in the bank. What it would mean is it would put a little bit of a strain on us at the beginning of the school year for cash flow needs. Just a reminder, we're a Chapter 41 district, so almost all of our money comes from local tax dollars. And so property taxes are assessed and are valued in the summer. They're assessed in October and they're not due until January 31st. You can split your payment and have that due by, I believe, the end of November, and then the second payment later on in the year. So we have some time as a Chapter 41 district where we're waiting on money to come in from our local taxpayers. If we were a Chapter 42 district, then we'd be getting more regular infusions of money from the state on a more regular basis. So because of being Chapter 41, there is a time from when the budget starts in September 1st through December, January, where we're drawing down without having tax dollars added back into our account.
And so what that means then, if we don't have enough in the bank as we're drawing that down, then what?
There's a possibility we could go and do what's called a TANS, or a tax anticipation note. It's just short-term borrowing, have enough money to be able to make payroll, then paying it back when your property taxes come in January. So to my knowledge, we have not ever done that in College Station ISD, even in the early 2000s when we had a lower fund balance and lower percentage of the overall appropriations budget. I believe one year the board approved one, but we never actually had to go and get a TANS.
So the 17.5% line is basically the line that we project as the needed amount to prevent, let me say it differently, to fund operations without having to go get financing for those because of that time lapse of getting the money.
That's our best guess now. We
Yes,
haven't
right.
gotten close to it yet. I mean, as we got closer, we would know much better at that time what that number really is.
Gotcha.
Where does that money really come from? I mean, is it like from a bank or is it a state?
Yeah,
From the
yeah.
state?
No, we would go to a financing institution.
Is it like a loan shark where there's a lot of fees
No,
and stuff, or is it? No, I'm,
No, those are, we have not, as I said just a second ago, we have not ever done one, and it was in the early 2000s the last time the board approved one. So we can, if you'd like to know more about how TANs work, we can get that information and bring it back to you. I don't want to speculate at this time. 'Cause we haven't
It's
done
like
one.
a payday loan.
Right.
Maybe a little bit,
walk down the
just to know how, I mean, are the terms reasonable? Is it something that, okay, that's not the end of the world? Or is it, yeah, it's kind of costly and we really want to avoid that,
Sure, we can certainly bring that back to you.
but not an inordinate amount of time, because as you say,
We're not
all
close
that's
to it now.
projected. We're
I'd
quite a
wager we
ways.
want to avoid it.
I'm thinking Mr. Martindale will make sure that we avoid it. He said he didn't want to get, if he got paid, didn't get paid for a while.
Right.
Yeah,
think we
and
make
We'll
that
just
up.
defer his
I
paycheck.
just deferred my paycheck. That would get us right there where we need it to be. So
Problem
I-
solved.
I think, there's several legislative years in here. This is
Including this
worst
one.
case scenario. And so I think that this can absolutely get your attention. I think the work now prepares us for then. So the green represents where we are now. The movement on the fund balance number from August of last year to now, that's because we had an audit during that time. So it reset that value. So if you remember, there was projected deficit and we actually came into the good. So it reset our starting value as far as our fund balance. And then this will back out what we're showing current year. So that's why you see the green move up relative to where it was before, because we have a new starting value. And then you can see it crossing about the same as what we had going last August. And again, the reason for this has to do with where it's tracking less than the red. I'm going to go back a slide. It really has to do with changes in this projected enrollment growth. Because previously, from the demographer, next year he actually had like a 4.1%, and he had a couple 4s and 3s out here, and they reset those values this past fall. So those shifts are really what account for this movement down here, or the greater deficit or lesser fund balance, so to speak.
So clarification, what happens after the audit when we get and I hate to use the word real fund balance, what that is adjusting from what we had budgeted to what we didn't have as big a deficit as we.
Correct.
Okay, so that's what resets that.
Exactly. And quite honestly, there are some amendments to those initial numbers, when I add some of that revenue I spoke of over the next few months, then you're going to see this number, this one, like if I add a line for May, you'll see it shift ever so slightly up again because you're going to be resetting that anticipated fund balance, if that makes sense. So we'll be projecting a lesser deficit because if I adjust the revenue side, it'll reset our starting point again.
You can continue to shift upwards.
That is the goal.
We'll do our best. This is all current year situation. Of course, as we progress through current year, we'll watch and see how the school year ends as far as our ADA and enrollment. I have our preliminary values from Mr. Price and the appraisal district here in the next few weeks, so that'll give me an indication on the 6.5% that I'm using now. And of course, we'll continue to track that as far as our recapture and then what we can do with the exceptional item request and new personnel staffing. The largest unknown at this point in time is what's going to occur in Austin. But I do want to speak a little bit to House Bill 3 because that's the most significant conversation that's occurring in Austin at this time. House Bill 3, you may all be aware of, it adds it's a $9 million. That wouldn't do much for us. $9 billion investment by the state into public schools. 6.3 of that would be, in essence, new monies to school districts or recognized dollars. 2.7 would be used to allow for property tax compression, property tax rate compression. So what that looks like to us, and again, this is all just House Bill 3 talk, would be compressing our M&O rate from $1.04 to $1. So the state accounts for giving us the revenue we would lose as a district from that compression, but providing relief to the local taxpayer at 4 cents. The big pieces of what House Bill 3 does is it increases what's called the basic allotment to $6,030 per student. It's currently at $5,140. That's a winner for all school districts. When you increase that basic allowance per student, that's a win for all school districts. It doesn't matter if it's property wealthy, a poor district, anything else. That's a benefit collectively to all districts throughout the state, and that would be an absolute positive for us as well. It does earmark a percentage of those increases, whatever you would recognize from House Bill 3 as a district, for raises to all staff with the exception of administrators. So it earmarks that you utilize a certain amount of that increase to provide raises for staff.
A 25% increase from the basic allotment, not just the net of it, but whatever we would realize from that.
Correct.
A quarter of that would have to be go to staff salaries, except administrators.
Another piece that has significant impact on us, it would reduce recapture by $3 billion across the state over the biennium, and I show there that's a 38% reduction. That would have significant impact on us as well as all other Chapter 41 districts that are paying recapture. Those are the big pieces that are wins for us and would have an influence on our current circumstances in a positive way. Something else that really I don't think gets as much attention, but is important, is that House Bill 3 also maintains the calculation of state aid or recapture utilizing prior year values. That's called funding lag, or typically the state's calculations are a year in the rear relative to current year collections on local values. So it keeps that in place because there is some talk of trying to shift that in the Senate, but that's huge as well, and it doesn't get much attention.
Speaking of lags, on that, do you think that would go into effect the next year or the year after, or you think it's going? I realize it wouldn't be this year, but do you think it would be? Sometimes when they do the legislation, hey, we're going to change this, and it's going to happen in 2 years from now.
No,
it would be September.
It would be
September 1.
It would influence the numbers that I'm showing you right now.
Well, and that
And
last,
Mr. Martindale,
Yes. Does it scare me to death?
Have you run the numbers of what it would look like? And I apologize if you all are looking at that with the scenarios of House Bill 3. Have you run those? What would that look like for us?
Those are still very preliminary, and we've received some different information from different folks. So I guess I could say this. If House Bill 3 were to go through in its current form, it would be good for the state of Texas. It would be good for College Station ISD. I don't know that we should get too married to House Bill 3 because there's still a lot of negotiation that's going to go on with the Senate. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the regular meeting with where we are in school finance, the debate in the legislative process. But if it were to go through close to the form that it's in right now, it would mean that the $6.7 million, $6.6 million deficit that we looked at earlier, it would suck up all of that and would give us an opportunity to do a few more things with that as well. So it would allow us to do many of the things that we need to do for next school year.
Okay, thank you.
It would, the recapture piece would bring tremendous benefit to us in reducing that $18 million line item that we currently have.
So we've seen some projection of no recapture payment to a very minimal recapture payment. But remember, because of tax rate compression and because the taking away of the cost of education index and some other allotments, our revenue side would be lower as well. But I think the big benefit for our community is local tax dollars would be staying here. Significantly more local tax dollars would stay in the district as compared to current law.
It would make this picture look a lot better.
And we're looking at the Harris graph, Mrs.
I'm sorry, I went back. Yes,
Right.
apologize. But I'm sorry.
No, keep going on that if you're still going.
Well, I was just going to mention, because I don't think the people get caught up in the basic allotment and this and the recapture, all benefits to us, absolutely. A piece that I watch is the funding lag piece, because that's currently in play now. House Bill 3 continues to utilize that as far as the state's calculations of recapture and their funding piece. And that's important because it allows us to project more accurately what our budget, as we're making preparations for the next year. If they were to adjust, I'll give you an example. If I added another column for 1920 out here, and the right now with the lag, this 10.1 billion, which is what we're collecting our local property taxes on right now, would just slide down, and that's what the state will use next year to determine our recapture and what they're going to pay. And I can project that pretty closely because that is what's running under current law. If they move to, and so then we would really be projecting is, what is the appraisal district going to tell us next year looks like. If they move to current year on the state funding as well, you would have a column out here, and every number out here would be a projection all the way through August. You would be projecting what recapture would be with less reliability than what we can do now, as well as your state aid. There are much more projections involved. So there's tremendous strength in having this 1 year lag on the state using those calculations, because I can really narrow those projections in a lot tighter as we prepare the budget. So I think this piece doesn't get as much attention as a lot of the others, but it is a vital piece of being able to prepare a budget. So those are big pieces of House Bill 3 that I think would have a very positive impact on us as a district.
Chairman Huberty, Speaker Bonin, and others in the House have recognized the tremendous burden it would put on local districts to move to current year values. while it would be a cost-saving measure for the state, and it was one of the items that was highlighted in the joint interim session on school finance, that's why they have made that a non-starter in the House version, House Bill 3. We have heard rumblings that the Senate in their work in school finance may add that back in. I think it's been estimated to be about a $1.8 billion savings for the state. That means it would be understand as savings for the state, the money just doesn't go away, it has to come from somewhere else. And it comes from reduced appropriations to local districts. And so it would be a hardship for us if we move to current year values.
Well, and to me, then, by the way, that was my question. So thanks, you read my mind. It's important to highlight what that really means as we work through our budgeting process here. And when those numbers actually become known, a lot of them aren't known until after we have finalized our budget. And what they're going to do is basically say even more of our budget is unknown, so it's more or less a guess. And then
more amendments during the current year to get it right once we have an
right,
understanding
so
of how
not only
much
the revenue side, but also the expense side. And then at some point you wonder, well, kind of what's the point?
Right. Because we would not be able to calculate recapture.
We couldn't calculate recapture, which as we're seeing in our budget is a huge number. I mean, it's the difference between a positive and a negative budget, or being able to manage your cash flow or having to go borrow money to pay teachers. And that's significant. And if they can eliminate that unknown, I think we're better off. Even if it means they choose to, quote, save the state money elsewhere, that's fine, but don't give us another unknown because it's harder for us to deal with.
Yes, sir.
Right, and that's why I think you hear a lot about House Bill 3 and some of these other things, but I think this is a sleeper piece of that brings tremendous value to trying to anticipate things. So that's why I mention it here. So, yes, sir. So current law situation I've kind of shared with the group. House Bill 3 as written now would benefit us as well. Anything that addresses recapture is an immediate benefit to us. I'd be happy to answer any other questions at this time.
Well, thank you for that. I had jotted down the first thing I wanted to make sure Mrs. Green was able to hear and got everything, but I guess based on her question, she's following it pretty well.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and the next thing was, in transmittal, you communicated some information about bond rating, and I'm going to bring it up here because of some of the reasoning given by the rating agency about, well, I don't want to steal your thunder. Can you describe to the group a little bit about maybe some recent news in our bond rating?
Well, yes, I can. We had a ratings call with Moody. They just like to annually do a ratings call just to kind of keep up with things. They typically have a more comprehensive review whenever there's possibility of us going out with bond or those types of things. This was just an annual review of them. They're actually upgrading our rating one level. Even though we adopted a $4.6 million deficit, they're aware that we're looking at another comparable deficit under current law next year. However, they still chose to upgrade us one level just due to being able to add to our fund balance the last several years, even with adopting a deficit, and just good conservative management by the board and other folks throughout the last couple of years. So I thought it was amazing. I really anticipated that we would just kind of maintain what we had. I never really questioned being able to maintain the rating they had provided us, but actually upgrading us considering the obstacles with recapture, and they even noted that in their release that we've taken on recaptures going from 5 million to 15 million, a 200% increase yet we tend to budget conservatively and manage accordingly. So that's a positive for us.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to point that out because it's one thing for you to draw an oval around some positive things and some obstacles we've overcome and things we've been able to accomplish. But it's quite another thing to have a bond rating agency actually upgrade us after we've been through what we've had. And I think it's a testament to the good work that the administration and you in particular in that role have
I
done.
appreciate that. I would like to point out that Mr. Martindale said we went up one level. We went up to AA1, which is the second highest rating you can get, just one step below AAA, which we were guaranteed under the Permanent School Fund. And so I do echo your thoughts about Mr. Martindale and his leadership in that division.
Yeah, good job. So thank you both.
I mean, the last thing we would want to do is have to go out for bond and issue that at junk bond status, right? I mean, that would be bad. That
Yes,
costs
it
you
would.
that costs you a lot of money, right?
It would.
Millions of extra taxpayer dollars if you're not managing your finances well. So it's just worth pointing out. So good job to you guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, that takes us to item C2, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to board policies GKD local and FEF local regarding private counselors in schools. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Last month, we came to you with an idea to address some issues that we have in this community and with our school system to be able to provide needed services to school children. And we're talking about the ability of folks in our community to provide for the mental health need of kiddos in College Station ISD. We talked at length last time about the difficulty in a town as big as we are with so many 18 to 23-year-olds in town and so many other people in need of services that is very difficult for those who need private counseling services to be able to find that time to do that, especially if everybody's having to do that at the end of the workday or at the end of the school day. So we had the idea of what if we could open up our schools during the day, not just to anybody, but to folks that we enter into memoranda of understanding with, both the school district and the parents, and allow them to be able to use our facilities to meet the mental health needs of kiddos that they're already in relationship with during the school day. One, it would be able to increase the capacity we have for mental health related services. Two, they wouldn't have to even leave the school and would save on travel time. To do that, we would need to adjust a couple of local policies, one of them being GKD local for facilities use, the other one being FEF local for absences. We have worked with our policy consultant with the Texas Association of School Boards, and we've got some draft policy that we shared with you last week. We just wanted to continue the conversation, see if you had any information, hear your conversation about that. So with that, I'll give over to Molly Perry, our Chief Administrative Officer.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ely. As mentioned, we began the discussion last month and shared with you all in transmittal the draft policy language. You may have noticed it was relatively minimal because really we're looking at adding that exception under GKD local regarding counselors in addition to private music lessons, and then in FEF ensuring that our students would not be counted as unexcused absences during that time. Obviously, a lot of the details are going to be worked out through those memoranda, which we're continuing to work with council on regarding things like certification of the employee, ensuring that we have a process in place for background checks, et cetera. But with that, we are moving forward in terms of working through those types of details. And should you all be interested in pursuing this option, we would love to bring it next month and be ready to implement with the beginning of the 1920 school year.
Thank you. Well, I can say for me, anything that we can do as a board to increase or facilitate better mental health and wellness of the students, I'm in favor of it. But with that, anybody have any questions, concerns, comments, things you want to have looked at before we address it a little more formally next month? Ms. Green,
100%
you
in
good?
favor of it.
Sorry,
I
what'd you
think I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, we can't see a head nod. Okay,
No problem. I appreciate you asking.
okay. Well then, with that, we will move on to item C3. Thank you. Receive bond construction update. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. In November of 2015, the citizens of College Station ISD overwhelmingly passed a $135.9 million bond. And that bond was to do a number of things. To build 3 campuses, our third middle school, Welborn Middle School, our third intermediate school, Pecan Trail, and our 10th elementary school, River Bend, to do a number of other that's what I'm looking for, John, deferred maintenance projects, as well as purchase land and provide buses and technology. We are getting close to the end of the 2015 bond. In fact, the last major project of that is River Bend Elementary, and that is set to open in August. We have our temporary certificate of occupancy from the city and are really close to getting that final certificate of occupancy ready to move forward. As you've seen in some updates to the board, we've got furniture and we're about ready to move forward with that. So we're very excited about that. As a part of the oversight in your work and watching, what's going on with these taxpayer dollars, we bring to you our quarterly construction update. I anticipate this may be the last quarterly one, since we'll have, by the end of the summer, we will have almost all the funds expended for this. But with this, we have John Hall, our Executive Director for Facilities, to take us through our 2015 bond update. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Dr. Ely. Mr. Harris, members of the board.
No. Push it. There you go.
There we go. Thank you, Dr. Ely, Mr. Harris, members of the board. And thank you for this opportunity to give a 2015 bond update. I'm going to jump right into it. And I'll say, with my apologies if I get to speaking too fast tonight. I just got back from the Krispy Kreme grand opening, so I'm still riding a little bit of a sugar rush here. So
Riding the light.
it was crazy over there. So
Thank you for bringing some for us.
yes. So 2015 bond general information. We'll start at the beginning like we always do. It was passed in November of 2015 for a grand total of $135.9 million. And it included recommendations made by the Planning for Growth Committee, which everyone gathered up to consider all the different enrollment and capacities and all of the information we typically do. And that concluded with a recommendation made to the school board for the following construction projects. These 5 major areas. We've got intermediate school number 3, which of course ended up being Pecan Trail. Middle school number 3, which ended up being Welborn Middle School. River Bend Elementary School, which Dr. Ely just said we're just hitting the finish line on that one, as well as some renovations to the current intermediate and middle school campuses, and about $5.2 million worth of deferred maintenance. And of course, as we always do when we pass a bond package, we pick up a couple of other items for technology, buses and vehicles, and land acquisition in the corresponding amounts, which I will not be giving updates on that, but just as a reminder, those are also in the bond. So I'll jump on into the construction stuff here and say, I'm gonna give these sequentially on how we built them. So starting in November of 15, after we passed the bond, we immediately jumped into planning for the A&M Consolidated Middle School Athletics Locker Room Addition, which we were able to complete that summer. We really had to crank that one out, but got that one finished just in time for school to start that fall. Right across the street over at Oakwood, we also, if you remember that front elevation, how funny that thing used to look, really cleaned that up that summer. Got a nicer looking curb appeal there. We went inside the building, as you can see from the picture on the right there, and kind of created an entry lobby area there that really improved the looks of the school. While we were building on those, we had already started on the Pecan Trail Intermediate School over there. You can see over to the left of the photo here. That's, of course, Greens Prairie Elementary School. And so we'd been working on that one until we got to the summer of 2017 when we finished that one up. So we were proud to get that project finished. Our enrollments were getting pretty tight for the intermediate schools. And while we were finishing that one up, we were able to do a couple other projects. Here's an interior photo of Pecan Trail Intermediate School of the cafeteria area. And then also, while we were working on that intermediate school, that opened us up for that summer to do some other work at the 2 other intermediate schools. Since we knew the enrollments were going to be smaller, we were able to get in there and do some couple of the collaborative areas or the flexible learning areas. That's the picture on the right for Oakwood. While we were over at Oakwood too, we were able to pick up some very needed upgrades on our flooring. Got a few more lockers and some tile, and cleaned up a couple of restrooms that were really needed over there. And then on the other side of town, over at Cypress Grove Intermediate School, we were able to pick up a collaborative learning area as well over there. And I've got a picture of one of the restrooms. We were able to pick up a couple of restroom complexes over there, which were, I'll say, well received by the student body. In addition, in the summer of 2017, we were able to pick up some work over at Southwood Valley Elementary School. Before we started this project, that cafeteria area really looked rough. Paint was peeling and everything, so we were able to get that whole wing of the building that summer. We weren't able to get the whole school, but we were able to get a good jump start on it there with that section. So forward and on through the rest of the year, of course, we were working on Wellborn Middle School that whole time. So fast forward to the next summer, which is the next major deadline in my world for getting things finished right before school starts. We slid in safe at home plate for Wellborn Middle School. Just seemed like days before school started over there. That was a tough project, and we got it finished just in time. Really turned out looking extremely nice, if I do say so myself. Here's a little aerial photo you can see to give yourself a reference point. This is Reuter Road on the front there, and you can see the nice long queuing space all the way down that we coordinated out with the city to get all of that traffic off of the road. And from what people are telling me in the neighborhood over there, and from what we've experienced ourselves too at the other 2 schools over at Pecan Trail and Greensbury, it really has helped a lot. Traffic is a lot better than I would have guessed it was going to be. Here's another little photo on the interior of Wellborn Middle School, kind of at the big cafeteria area. And also, similar to when we worked on the intermediate schools, we knew we were going to be finishing up the middle school, so we had time that summer to work on the other existing middle schools, which included the AMC MS renovations in 2018. We were able to pick up a couple of collaborative learning areas on that school. There's a photo of one of them here. We were able to pick up lots of technology and white marker board paint on the walls and all that. And over at College Station Middle School, we were able to do the same thing over there. Pick up a couple of those spaces, one for each grade level. Also, during the summer of 2018, we were able to take the first half of South Knoll Elementary. And so looking at the photo here, the hatched area kind of on the top of the photo there, that's the south side of the building. That's where we were able to renovate our kindergarten classroom area, our cafeteria area, and we were able to do some fire sprinkler installation over at the main gym building. We didn't get a lot of finishes done, but we got some important stuff for the fire sprinkler system. So here's a couple of pictures of South Knoll. It's just a typical kindergarten classroom in there, and I probably should have dropped in a before picture because this is amazingly better than what it was.
Amazing.
Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? So, this, of course, we picked up the restrooms in the kindergarten wings. They each have their own individual restrooms in the classroom, so that was a nice renovation as well. Then, of course, fast forwarding on to River Bend Elementary School, not fast forwarding all the way to the summer, we were able to finish this one in the middle of the school year. For the first time, I think, in my career since joining College Station ISD, I've had the luxury of just a little bit of time to get something finished, which has been kind of weird, but kind of nice. So we're just getting that one to the finish line. We got our temporary certificate of occupancy about a week ago. We're still working on some irrigation and landscaping on the exterior of the building, but we've got official approval to occupy the interior of the building. We got Robin Jones moved in there with at least one person on our staff, so we can continue going through all the furniture installation through the rest of the building and get it all ready while we get our irrigation and our landscaping and sod and everything on the exterior. Dropped a little picture of the gym over here. Looks like it's about ready for PE class in there. So, and seems like I put a lot of these cafeteria pictures in for
You really
some
like
reason.
cafeterias, don't you?
I do. It's my thing. But we've got the stage up in the front. But yeah, you can see. Of course, we've got all the new furniture in there for the cafeteria tables and everything. So, and in fact, we had a couple of events over there with Robin recently, and we had Leadership CSISD over there a few nights ago, which was really nice. So here are the projects still upcoming for the 2015 bond package. We've got A&M Consolidated Middle School renovations Phase 1. We've been talking about this one already, I believe, well, and I know you've already approved this, but just to give you a little color code lesson on this one, the blue stuff in the middle, which is considered your public space area, that's what we're going to be doing this summer. So we're going to be focusing on the main public areas of the corridors, kind of the big crossing area in the center. We're going to be doing some work in the cafeteria, my favorite place over there. Doing a little paint work in some of the gyms over there as well for A&M Consolidated Middle School. And we're going to catch the private space area, the green areas, in a subsequent phase. Looking at the same map over the College Station Middle School campus, you can kind of see once again those big blue areas in the middle. The corridors, we're going to be upgrading paint and tile. We're going to be picking up some new lockers over there. College Station Middle School lockers were getting pretty dogged out, so we're getting some new lockers over there. That'll help it look a lot better. Doing a little bit of work back in the gyms as well over there. So that's going to be a summer full of work for both of those campuses. We're going to be humping it to get to the finish line on those. And in addition to that, we're going to go back and catch the other half of South Knoll renovations for the summer of 19. And that's really, we were talking about this one last summer. We're going to be doing that front piece of the building and basically getting into all of the other classrooms, changing out, putting new carpet, new flooring, new casework, new ceiling grid, and that sort of stuff. And we're going to sneak back over there into that gym building and pick up some paint and finishes in there while we're at it, since we won't have to be waiting for the fire sprinkler guys to get out of our way. So with that said, this will be using the last of what we specifically identified as deferred maintenance funds for the 2015 bond package. That doesn't necessarily mean we're completely to the finish line. What we are doing currently is we're gathering up all of the savings from Welborn Middle School project. And I'll say, I probably should have put this on this presentation as well. We're also going to be picking up some from River Bend Elementary School now that we're getting that one finished up. Looks like we got the landing gear down, about to come in for a landing on that one. So we're going to have some money to save off of that too. What we're going to be doing is adding up all that money, putting it all up into one pile and comparing that against the scope we would like to tackle next summer for the summer of 2020 for A&M Consolidated Middle School and College Station Middle School renovations Phase 2. And hopefully we can get everything that our appetite desires on it, but we'll know after I kind of reconcile those numbers just a little bit. So, and so as of the end of the following summer of 2020, basically that 2015 bond package is just about going to be tapped out, with the exception of maybe replacing a couple of air conditioning units or something, very, very minor. And so, so that's basically where we stand for the 2015 bond package. I'd love to answer any questions y'all might have for me.
Thank you for that. Questions?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. So I was on that Planning for Growth, that 2015 Planning for Growth, and so were you, weren't you, Nugent?
I was.
And I remember all those discussions and talking about what we need to do, and it's kind of crazy whenever you actually see pictures of everything completed or almost completed. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. New buildings, renovations, and also, can tell you, from being in those schools, having kids in a lot of those schools that have gotten renovations, they're so very appreciated. Keeping that up and maintaining those buildings and those learning spaces is very, very appreciated by the students, parents, staff, all of the above. But it was kind of crazy to see it all put together, all the work that's been done. So, thank you.
Well, thank you. I'll pass that on to everyone. I probably should have said at the beginning, the more I stay out of Theo Rouse's way and the Pepper Lawson guys and the VLK guys, it seems like the smoother it runs. But I get to stand up here, or sit up here and tell you all about how great it was. But it's due to a lot of really, really great people taking care of this stuff behind the scenes for us. So.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else? Okay, then I guess we are adjourned and we'll be back at 7.